So I've spent years working in roles that are social work roles, so case management roles, working with individuals who are coming into their own for age and learning how to navigate adulthood and being a teen. So I was working with young adults who were HIV positive. And there is a big overlap for some trans people and HIV, particularly trans women, experience high levels of HIV infection. And so I was finding that a lot of the individuals that I were working with were trans-identified. So I became sort of an expert in trans issues within that setting. I was really good at helping people with things like legal name change, gender marker change. I understood these systems. I was looking at resources and ways to help people. And so this position came up working in the Pediatric Center. And a number of people came to me and said, you should apply for this. This really seems just something that you would be really good at. And so I applied, I started. That would have been around 2018. The center had only been open for a year. And I was the second person to take the role of the case manager in this center. And really probably only one of two people in the entire state of Missouri to have such a role. And I really did go into this believing that we were going to alleviate suffering and help young people become their truth selves and embody their truth.
That's interesting, right? Because this is the kind of the core idea here behind this, is that if you help young people early to realize they're the opposite sex or something different than their, as what they call assigned at birth, which I find that phraseology, frankly, highly problematic. But that if you deal with that early, then you'll have a healthy, happy person on the other side. That's the core. So would you agree?
Yeah, that's the core idea behind the whole concept. Yes.
And everything I've been learning about this over the last several years tells me the opposite is true.
Yes, if you really start to look at where these treatments came from and evolved and how we came to even be interfering in the pediatric body, you start to really question the whole model of care itself. I didn't realize when I started at this center the history of how this developed out of something called the Dutch protocol that came out of the Netherlands, and how truly revolutionary and without a lot of good quality research it was to start blocking puberty in a healthy developing body and go from a puberty blocker to a cross-sex hormone in a pediatric child's body. And as as I worked in the center and as I began to understand more and more not only where this came from, but what we were seeing in the population, so many truths about the treatment, they just weren't holding water.
So one of the things that's in your affidavit is that, I believe, is that in the Dutch model, they excluded young people with these psychiatric comorbidities, whereas in the scenario that you were working, almost every prospective patient had the serious psychiatric comorbidities. Yeah.
Yeah, so the Dutch were excluding individuals with severe or concurrent mental health issues, but they were also excluding patients who did not have lifetime gender dysphoria. So part of their protocol was people had to have been experiencing this condition that we call gender dysphoria from a very, very young age. And what we're seeing in this cohort in the United States is a huge number of, frankly, teenagers who do not have any lifetime or early onset gender issues presenting in these clinics. And there are teens who have learned enough to say, oh, but I have been experiencing this from an early age. But we see this disconnect where they claim this, but there's no real family history. In medicine, you want to not only trust but verify. So if somebody tells me I've had this since I was, my earliest memories, but yet you can find nothing in their medical records. There was nothing where they came to a pediatrician and mom had a conversation with the pediatrician about, I'm concerned about my child's gender presentation, or a kindergarten teacher. There's nothing documenting this. These are really a significant number of teens who are coming forward at 15, 16 with these presentations that we just don't see any history of. And these are patients that were always excluded. These were not patients that were included in these early treatment models.
What were you thinking? You mentioned you believed you were stepping into something that could be helpful, right, to young people, I think. But just explain to me the mental state or the reality or the core assumptions of a person that is involved in this ostensibly in believing they're doing good.
I think there's a number of themes that you see in pediatric gender medicine. So in a number of these centers, these are doctors, psychologists, psychiatrists, social workers who really do have strong beliefs about helping young people. They see suffering. A lot of these doctors are young doctors. They're newer in these fields. One of our doctors was directly out of residency, and he was named a co-director. And there is an intentional practice of hiring into these centers of people directly from my community. So they are hiring individuals who are within the LGBT. And that's intentional, and it also creates these feelings where you cannot go against these narratives, because you're not just, you're going against your own tribe. You're going against your own people if you step forward and say, I don't see this working the way that it was sold. I see people being harmed. And one of the reasons why there are so many lesbian, gay, bi adults who are working in this field is because so many people experienced gender questioning and confusion as a young person. For so many lesbian, gay, and bi people, it's just part of our growing up. We experience gender in different ways. We are tomboys. We are what used to be referred to as sissy girls. We experience gender differently. And part of the problem is we see ourselves in these kids, yet we have no good way of diagnostically differentiating who of these patients would just grow up to be a gay person versus who might experience more of a lifelong gender questioning pathway.
Which for all accounts is extremely rare.
Extremely rare.
Right.
Honestly, if you looked at earlier data, most of these kids are gay kids. And most of the gay community that I struggle with is we are taking away sexual function and fertility from our own selves as younger people. And that's something that is hard to face as an adult who has had biological children, who has been able to find comfort in my own gender and sex. We're taking these decisions and we're taking this away from children.
If there's anything we've learned from the last few years, is this power of social conformity, or the power of the need to belong, overcoming, frankly, in a lot of cases, rationality.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm kind of beginning to get a sense of how this works, but the effects, as you pointed out moments ago, on these kids are a life of suffering. I mean, that's not oversimplifying it, is it? In many cases.
No. We were not just an ideological bubble, but we were upheld by the university. Our culture right now is upholding places like these as if we are somehow the sacred, the unable to be questioned.
Don't forget to subscribe to our Alerts newsletter, and you'll never miss an episode.